This year's Labor Day Classic will be a massive mix of football and music, presented by WeatherTech. It all starts with Born in the 80s jamming on the Stipley stage during pregame. Then Dwayne Gretzky will perform during halftime and provide an hour-long concert after the game. Plus, we're now offering the Labor Day Plus 2-pack. You can get tickets to the Labor Day Classic and any 2 games remaining on the schedule for one low price. Get your tickets now by going to ticats.ca/tickets or call 905-547-CATS.
From the Ticats Audio Network, this is the CFL This Week with Bubba O'Neil.
While it's setting up to be a 2-horse race in the East, who is the best in the West? Has the Rouge shamed the Canadian Football League? Will it be Bell or the Butler in Steeltown? And which Labor Day Classic is this week's marquee matchup? This is the CFL This Week on the Ticats Audio Network. I'm your host, Bubba O'Neil. You are locked to the Canadian Football League's top podcast that features the very best broadcasters, columnists, insiders, and analysts from all over the country. And that's why we love this podcast so much. You know what? When I take a look at this week's trio, we could actually broadcast a game right now. I'll do the pregame and the postgame show, working the sidelines with all those little tidbits of information and golden nuggets. And all the info you do need to know from TSN is Matthew Scianitti. Thank you, Matthew, for joining us.
What's up, Bubba?
Hey, the analyst to break down all the big plays coming from 630 CHED in Edmonton, covering the Double E, Dave Campbell. Just appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you very much for inviting the radio guys with these 2 TV pretty boys. Appreciate it.
And with the call of the game on that microphone is CFL on TSN's Marshall Ferguson. Always a pleasure, partner.
Yeah.
Actually, are you going to be doing some motor bike racing, or I don't know what else you have planned?
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of everything, Bubba. As long as you want to hang out with me, we're good. We can just do all the sports.
Okay, let's go right at it, guys. Matthew, I believe you're on the sideline for this contest. Boy, a lot of people talking about this game still to this point, almost a week later. Argonauts and Riders. The game ends 20-19, 1 point different, and it ends on a missed field goal. The Rouge comes into effect. I need to ask you, because people from all over the United States, all over Canada, are saying it's the most ridiculous, dumbest rule in sports. Does the rule need to be massaged, Matthew?
I don't think it needs to be massaged. I just think we need to move on from it. There's so many wonderful things, and I know this might hit a nerve with my 2 friends, Dave and Marshall here, but the fact is I think we need to move on from it. There's so many other wonderful things about the Canadian Football League that trying to massage it in terms of, well, there shouldn't be a rouge if you boot it through the end zone. It has to be, a missed field goal that could potentially be returned, where you down the runner in the end. Just get rid of it. Just get rid of it. It doesn't. What makes the CFL great are the other wonderful details and idiosyncrasies about the league that don't involve kicking through the end zone to get a single point. In a bygone era, I completely appreciate it. I understand it, but it has no place now. And it's, a lot of Argos fans were kind of chirping me when I said, well, I'm not trying to take the win away from the Argos. And I'm not. They set themselves up to win the game. And I know certainly one argument could be made another way, that their defense pinned the Riders, and then the Riders had to flip the field position, and it came back with the Argos, and then they had a chance to win on a field goal. But then for Liram Hawrylahtu, who has a tremendous leg, to simply just have to boot it through the end zone to win is just foolish. Now, there are other leagues, the AFL, Gaelic football, where their single point is very, very important to the overall structure of the game. But in our league, I think it's pointless.
All right, Marsh, how would you have called that last moment?
You know what? So I think I would have called it knowing exactly, as Matthew said, that Liram has a great leg, and understanding the situation and going, does it even matter if he hits this? Because as long as he crushes this thing, and here's my whole thing on the Rouges, it's totally framed by personal experience. I don't think if I had this personal experience in a high school football game that I would care in the slightest way for the Rouge. However, I have an emotional attachment to it because high school championship, I think it was like 2007, 2008 in Kingston, we're playing against Holy Cross, huge crosstown rivals, big lead up to the game. and it's back and forth and this great matchup, and we get it. The game is like something like 2019 or something like that. It's really, really close, and then we ended up winning a city championship in my grade 12 season on a Rouge. But here is the thing: it wasn't a missed field goal, because in high school football, field goal kicking, you're like, it's not like you're looking anywhere beyond 25 yards, right? Because you're like, unless you have a freak of a kid who's going to go on to play in the CFL, you're like, we're not kicking a field goal from 25. Like, we could drop the snap, they could return a fumble, like all these terrible things could happen. But we did have a great punter. So
I was going to say, aren't you a punter, Marshall?
No, I wasn't the punter. His name was Nathan Jeffrey. His dad was actually a longtime sports broadcaster in Kingston for CKWS, which was CBC at the time, and he ended up. We basically, from the 35, 40-yard line, snapped it back to him, and as time expired, he just housed a punt, and we rushed the field and we won the game. So
this is even worse.
No, so this is great because I actually love, and I understand everything that Matthew is saying. I'm not disregarding. Like, it is ridiculous. It is strange. He says that it's from a bygone era. It is. It was created in a bygone era. I totally get that. My whole thing is, I love the CFL because it's weird, which makes me love this rule because it's weird. Because this doesn't make any sense, and I agree. Therefore, I lean into the weirdness, and I say, I don't mind this being around. The reason I'm a fan of this, the reason I like it, aside from the weirdness, is strategically, I love the idea that, yes, you do have to have the returner back, and that you, at the end of a game, can, in a tie ball game, go ahead and win it with a missed kick. The sports psychology that goes into all of that, in the X's and O's, and the game planning, and the chess, and I think that's actually awesome, because there's so many things from our friends down south that I see in like the kickoff rules and everything that's been evolving, where it's like plays just don't have that level of 4D chess kind of going on at all times. The CFL has that all the time, and that's why I kind of like this ridiculous, strange, stupid, out-of-date rule.
All right, Dave, you've been on the field the most out of all of us here. How would it have felt had you won or lost in this manner?
Okay, so first of all, I agree with Marshall about in high school, like there's like 20 guys that have to, rep to kick a field goal because no one wants to do it. And eventually you go, we're just going to go for it. But
right.
Why can you find a punter on your high school team? You always find that punter. You never find a field goal kicker. So forget it.
Yeah.
Look, such a lame way to win a game. Like Lirim Hairolahu running up, jumping up and down. We won, yay! Because I kicked the damn thing so hard, and it went out the back line of the end zone. Oh, I'm so happy! And like, come on, man, this is ridiculous. Look, I don't think we should abolish it. I think we need to tweak it. And here's my simple tweak: is if you kick the ball directly out of the end zone, so say the ball sails out of the back or the dead ball line, you don't get a point. The point of and I said this last week on the show I'm hosting on 630 Ched, the point for failure. And I'm like, okay, listen to me closely. In the CFL, our end zones are live. So if you miss a field goal, it becomes a punt essentially, and you have a chance to return the football. The return game is important for the lifeblood of this sport, this league. It is one of the most exciting aspects. Ask Montreal Alouettes fans and James Letcher Jr., who returned a ball against the Riders a couple weeks ago, and that changed the complexion of that football game. You should have a chance to return the football, or you don't get a point, okay? That's the tweak I would make. So then you wouldn't see Lirim Hairolahu jumping up and down like he just, did something wonderful. To me, it's ridiculous. But I think the Rouge has its place, because the Rouge, it's about returning the football. You're having a chance to return the football out of the end zone. It is about field position too, because, it's funny. Jake Julian leads the league in singles. I think it's 7 or 8. He's not happy about that, by the way, because he's trying to coffin corner pin the offense and the return team. And you look on the side, you look at Jake after he gets a single, and he's PO'd because he's like, damn it, I missed it. So now we have to put the defense on the 40. So, no, I think that's the tweak I would make. If you kick the ball straight out of the end zone, you don't get the point. And I would not do it.
And the fact is this, the more that we talk about this, the possibility of a Rouge winning a Grey Cup is right there. And if that happens, and this is I don't care about a regular season game. I've seen this now twice at BMO Field. It happened against the BC Lions too. But if a Grey Cup, even and I'll concede, Dave, even in that amendment where it is about field position, and again, it goes back to the roots of Canadian football being a rugby sport, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even in that modification, a Grey Cup can still be won on a Rouge, and that to me, that's in the North American context of sports and how we view sports and how people are so invested in terms of hot takes and big plays. Yes, if this was a more traditional sport, I would understand it. But within the context of North American sports, to win a championship on a single point because of field position, it would be just disastrous.
Iconic. That's what it would be. It'd be on every single show around the world. They'd be like, wait, this is how they won it in Canada, and then everybody would rip it, but it would be remembered for centuries because it would be the
most CFL thing ever. Right. It would be amazing.
I'm actually interested in Dave's suggestion there because I whenever you hear about like a rule tweak, and everybody in this conversation knows this, immediately as soon as anything gets tweaked or any rule evolves, every single person across the league starts thinking about, okay, well then what can we do to work around that? Like that's their job. It's the same thing as Formula One, right? Whenever you talk about like, well, here are the regulations, and they go, okay, but how do we work around it and still be fast, right? So I love the idea of if that were the tweak, what we would end up seeing is, Jake Julian all of a sudden is going to get out the lob wedge, and from the 40, because they're at a field goal range or just across midfield, he's going to crush it on a punt, let's say, as high as he possibly can and as deep in the end zone as he possibly can without kicking it out the back. Yep. Then you have to make sure that you cover down. Can you get there in time? I mean, even on a field goal, if you didn't have trust in your field goal kicker, you could potentially see a punter coming out from like the 30-yard line, skying one. Everyone gets down there, circles around them, doesn't go inside the no yards, 5 yards. And then the second that the returner catches it, just try and hammer him. Like that would be you could still have a single from that, and it would be even as weird because you're trying to give the ability to have a return, but teams would work around it and go, well, how do we still get the single if we need to find a way with this machination of the rule?
I thought it was so interesting, Matthew, you were probably so close to the situation, watching the Rough Riders players as it sailed left and went wide. And they're like, I mean, obviously most of them being Americans thinking, yes, he missed it. And then someone saying, no, we still lost, right? It was incredible, the range of emotions on the field there.
Yeah, it was an incredible game in a lot of ways. And unfortunately, the Riders right now are still snake-bitten with all of these little things going against them. To have a game where you stop, like that whole Rouge took away from this. In a league with a yard off, which I love about the Canadian Football League, the Riders were able to stop the Argos 3 times within the 5-yard line, which is crazy. Which just shows like that was great. But had it not been for miscues on the offense, and certainly we can dissect Trevor Harris's play for a lot of that second half, it would have been a completely different game. But when you put yourself in that situation, as the Riders did, being so ineffective on offense, particularly in the fourth quarter, particularly with being backed up in the end zone, you make yourself vulnerable to something like that. And that's from the rule's not going to change tomorrow. So from just purely, to Marshall's point, a strategic perspective, absolutely, I totally get it. I mean, if you're going to win, you're winning within the rules, so it doesn't diminish what the Argos did. It's just like overall, it is. I can understand such a wonderful detail about the game because you have to think of it that way. And truly, going back to the point, I would love to see. I'd love to see a game decided. And I know, there's that famous game with the Argos and the Alouettes, but a kick out of the end zone and drop kicks going back and forth, I would love to see. Like that kind of stuff would be incredibly exciting. But, the Riders put themselves in that situation. And I don't fault Lirim Hajrullahu for, punching the air and going crazy. That's the rules. And if the Riders couldn't go ahead and capitalize on their opportunities, and they had a lot of them, then you know what? You can't go ahead and get upset when a guy kicks literally with an end zone as long and as wide as it is, just kicks it. He could have missed the uprights completely. He literally could have just said, whatever, I'll kick it in the other side of the end zone, and they still would have won.
The one thing I would love to see, because Matthew talks about that memorable Toronto-Montreal and doing the kick out, is like, yeah, the kick out is really cool, but think about how incredible the celebration on field would be if it was Labor Day coming up on Monday here, Argos, Ticats, and Hamilton, punts it, and it goes into the end zone. And then before the returner or anybody can actually start the kick-out sequence, like Carthel Flowers Lloyd, all of it is just like Bobby Boucher, like just all the way to, and then it just tees off on the returner in the end zone. The game's just over.
Like, it would be incredible.
Like,
People would storm the field. It would be awesome.
The stadium would explode in Hamilton if it ended on like a hit stick in the end zone for a single to end that thing. That like they would set off the fireworks, the music would start playing, and it would be crazy.
They'd love it. They'd love it.
Dave, the crazy thing is
why the worst job in football might be the special teams coordinator, because there's so many weird rules with our kicking game and return game. And you're like, oh, Coach, why did that happen? Oh, because I forgot to tell you. Sorry.
Yeah. Well, Pimpleton in Ottawa, I was calling that game in Ottawa where like the punt comes down and it rolls inside the 5-yard line. It was Ottawa-Calgary, and Cody Grace is a very knowledgeable guy who's come into the league as a punter. And so I'm calling it, and I go, Pimpleton's just watching the ball roll inside the 5. Here comes Cody Grace. Look out. It's cut. And sure enough, it's like last second he dives on the football, does Pimpleton, and keeps it away from Cody Grace. After the game, Pimpleton had an amazing game. We actually asked him, I believe it was Claire Hanna that was working on the sidelines, or Kenzie Lawan, and said, like, why, what happened on special teams there? And he just kind of looks up. He's like, yeah, I still got some stuff to learn, I guess. Like, I don't know as much as I think I do in the special teams game. And it's like, well, I ensure that Bob Dice and everybody that works special teams in Ottawa immediately said, okay, we got to have a conversation here about this. Because that does happen occasionally, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
And to that point, you have to applaud all of the guys who have been successful special teams coordinators of the last generation. When you think about Mike O'Shea, Bob Dice, Mike Benavides, Jeff Reinbold, like those guys, when you like, sometimes we dismiss it, especially when a new, slick American returner comes in. They look at the size of the field and they're like, oh, I could just run around everybody, and they can't. Having a great special teams coordinator that understands all the nuances of our game is so valuable.
Dave, did the Elks not lose a game last year? I think it was against Saskatchewan. The ball went over the head of a returner. Didn't really know what to do. He thought he was in the NFL, and it ended up being a single point for a win.
Morley and I tried to tell him to get out of the end zone, please, but he couldn't hear us for some reason.
You weren't loud enough, man.
No, was not loud enough. But yeah, C.J. Sims, where he let the ball sail over his head, and this is when the Riders just tied the game. It was like 11-11 or something like that. So C.J. Sims lets the ball sail over his head, and then picks the ball up and is not moving, and he hits the ground. He goes down on one knee. And I remember Scott Hutter, who's a great guy, great leader. You could tell his first reaction was like, "What did you do?" And then he just says, "Okay, that's all right. Let's go." But yeah, that was definitely one of those viral moments as well.
All right, guys, according to Lions head coach Rick Campbell, when asked about his choice of quarterback for this Thursday's game, that rematch against Ottawa, he says, we'll see. I don't know what that means. Obviously, I'll ask the quarterback the question, Rourke or Adams?
This is such a funny one to me because my gut says two things. One, this is just Rick Campbell trying to motivate Nathan Rourke, but then I'm like, why does Nathan Rourke need extra motivation? He's one of the most driven people I've ever been around. And the second thing is my gut instinct says, okay, maybe this is real and maybe they will just go ahead. But then you think, well, you're not going to take Nathan Rourke off the field, except for the fact that you have the MOP as your backup quarterback at this point, essentially, in the season. So this is very strange to me. I don't really know what the impetus is behind it, unless Rick Campbell is just being the most straight-up person of all time and saying, we might just need to make a change to give Nathan like a couple of extra weeks here to get up to speed and feel comfortable. Maybe we rush this. If VA is ready and he's in rhythm and we can win games with him now, maybe it's just that simple. Matthew, you know this from being around these teams and talking to people. Anything we get told, I'm constantly going, okay, what is like the third and the fourth evolution of this? Because I'm trying to figure out where the puzzle pieces are going. Am I overthinking it?
Rick Campbell has done this before. He did it back in 2016. Trevor Harris, I mean, it's a little bit of a different situation. Trevor Harris led them to an incredible regular season. And the second that Trevor Harris started to do a little bit of this, all of a sudden, remember, it was Henry Burris who started that year, and Trevor Harris came in. And then Rick Campbell was like, when they were getting towards the playoffs, was like, yeah, we're going with Henry. Like, Rick Campbell does this. And the one thing about him, although he kind of seems mild-mannered, he is incredibly exacting. He makes decisions, and that's it. And I'm not going to imply that Rick Campbell plays mind games, but he knows how to turn the screw every so often just to motivate. And I saw it happen in 2016. Again, it's a bit of a different situation, as Marshall correctly points out. I don't think anyone here dismisses the fact that when he's at his best, the only other person that can make the kind of throws that Nathan Rourke can make is Chad Kelly. So I think I'm shocked at what I've seen out of Nathan Rourke. And it's not because I don't think that he has the ability. It's not that I'm, have any deep questions about mechanics or motivation or anything. I just think that, I think we just not dismiss, but I don't think we fully appreciate how tough the last year and a half has been for him. Mm-hmm. To go down in the NFL, to be as capable as Nathan Rourke is, as talented as he is, to go through that whole rigmarole again and again and again and again would be mentally exhausting for anybody. Knowing that he's proved so much, knowing that I don't care where this goes viral, Nathan Rourke's a better quarterback than Gardner Minshew. And Gardner Minshew is going to be starting for the Las Vegas Raiders. The fact that Nathan Rourke hasn't gotten an opportunity boggles my mind, and I can't imagine what it's done for him. So Rick Campbell coming out and making this decision doesn't necessarily or not decision, but kind of alluding to something that he hasn't made a decision on whom he's going to put as his starter going forward. Doesn't surprise me, but I think that we should all kind of spare a thought for Nathan Rourke because he's been through a lot the last 2 years.
Yeah, the compassion is definitely there, although the blogs are going to run with the headline of Scianitti, quote, Rourke, washed, end quote.
Dave, go at it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point that you made, Matt. And the politics of the NFL is ridiculous, and that's why Austin Mack wanted to come back to the CFL. He wants a long-term deal with the Alouettes because he's tired of the politics down there. He knows he's probably better than, I don't know how many receivers, but he knows he's not going to get a shot because we can't tick off our $1 million whatever scouting department because that's why they get paid the big bucks, right? And when you go down there as a CFL free agent, you're an undrafted free agent, and you're basically in a position where you have to compete for the final spot, which is the 53rd spot, or somewhere on the P squad. So I think the mental anguish and the mental we got to remember these athletes aren't robots. I mean, there's a mental strain to all this. And why did he go back to BC? Oh, the money. Well, okay. But also he knows he's wanted. He knows he's going to be able to play. He knows that he's going to be appreciated, and he's going to be welcomed back with open arms. And it's a little surprising to see what has happened, the way he has played. He's obviously, too much thinking. Enoch Mwamba said last week, I think, if you think, you stink. And that's a bit of a problem. If VA's ready to go, I would go back to VA. But that's the problem. Is he ready to go? You can't rush him back either, because I know the Lions have lost 5 straight, but if you lose this game to Ottawa, there are other important games that are going to be happening past this game. And you look at the West right now, it is absolutely a squeeze right now between 1st and 5th. But I think if VA's ready, you start him. If he's not, you work with Nathan. But also in that comment from Rick Campbell, I want to go deeper. He mentioned his defense. Like, let's not ignore some things here. This is not a good football team right now. That defense can't stop anything. They can't get a pass rush to save their life without a blitz. They cannot stop anything through the air. They cannot stop anything on the ground. And their offensive line, that might be the worst offensive line in the CFL. There's a lot of issues that go beyond the quarterback.
Marshall, this is interesting to me, and we had Farhan on last week, and he kind of alluded to something that made me think. When you're in this journey of a season, for whatever it's been, the season started with VA as the guy. A lot of these players, especially on offense, don't know Nathan Rourke, haven't played with him. I'm wondering, Marshall, is this really VA's team and that he deserves to be back there and Nathan maybe can take it over next year?
Yeah, I think Matthew has seen the journey of VA as well as I have from when I was doing Hamilton radio, right? Which is like to see him, I don't want to say he was immature, but I just think he had some learning to do. He had to understand what the game was about, what the league was about, and whether it's getting bounced around or getting replaced several different times, like whatever it was, he's grown up. and he's a really, really good leader, and he's an excellent person to have in the locker room now. So to say, is it his team? I think, yeah, because like you say, when you go to training camp and everybody identifies that as your person, then you play essentially the first half of the season with that person, then you feel a connection to them. And yeah, there are receivers that have experience and understand the body language and the timing and the routes and all the rest and the offensive system and structure, because it's still Jordan McSimic there, who was working with Nathan Rourke when he was with the Lions. But I just feel like the room is probably in a little bit of stress and strife, I guess, if you want to say that. It's kind of like, how do you pick your favorite child, right? It's like, well, I'm sure the room loves Nathan for what Nathan has and the potential of Nathan and what he brings to the team. But how do you not love VA at this point, right? And that's why I kind of preface this off the top by saying it's a strange one, because how does Rick Campbell go ahead and pull the plug on Nathan? And the whole room goes, man, that's tough on Nathan. But then you give it to VA and the whole room's like, hey, good for VA. Or if you keep with Nathan, everybody goes, yeah, we believe in Nathan. He's got an opportunity. And then the whole locker room goes, man, but VA's getting robbed here. So it's tough to manage these things, right? Like when you have two really good quarterbacks, the old saying is if you have two, you don't have one. The Lions have two, and they have two. Like that, they have two really good quarterbacks. Only one of them can play. So whatever direction they decide to go, I just feel like there's going to be ups and downs and positives and negatives. And it really comes down to, and this is, I think, a really, really good test because it's such a strange and unique situation, Bubba, is how does Rick Campbell message whatever decision he makes to the locker room? How does that organization handle whatever decision they make from week to week? And the other thing is, how do they, I guess, avoid this becoming something that could take what I think could be legitimately a real Grey Cup threat team and have it kind of wear them down throughout the year? Because if we get to the point where it's every 1 or 2 weeks, as soon as somebody doesn't complete 75% of their passes for 300 yards and 4 touchdowns, if you have a complete 65% of your passes for 150 yards and a bit of a stinker, and you throw 1 touchdown but have 3 interceptions, is every week going to be, we're going to VA, and then the next week, well, we're going to Nathan, and then the next week, we're going back to VA, and then we're like, that is the thing I think that really kills teams in the CFL, when they just can't make up their mind, and it becomes stressful for the whole room to go, we don't know who's playing. Like, it affects the whole offense and the rhythm of the huddle and everything that comes with it. So I just hope that doesn't happen to them.
If it was any other coach but Rick Campbell, I would totally agree with you, Marshall. But
yeah, that's fair.
I go back to 2016. I don't know for a fact verbatim how hurt Trevor Harris was, but I was on the sidelines, and I knew not taking the team like he did to really the edge of the playoffs and playing as well as Trevor Harris was, and that was early in his career. For then him to get pipped by a decision, and then Henry Burrs comes in, and everybody remembers Henry winning one of the most incredible Grey Cups that we've seen, maybe next to the one that just happened last year. And then for him to lean back into Trevor after Henry retired, and then Trevor to take them to a Grey Cup 2 years later, Rick Campbell's the kind of guy who can make a tough decision, and his guys, particularly the one position where you can only have one guy in the field, at the most important position where you can only have one guy in the field at a time, it didn't seem to hurt that situation there. Now, to your point, Marshall, it wasn't back and forth and back and forth and back and forth, but Trevor Harris thought he could win that Grey Cup in 2016. Didn't get the opportunity. Henry Burris, his name is now up. He got his jersey retired. And yet, Trevor Harris was able to establish himself and build the career that he has now because Rick Campbell then went and invested in him, and he led them to, yes, the Grey Cup they lost in Edmonton in 2018. But along the way, Trevor Harris was incredible and really maybe not in the conversation for MOP year after year, but was considered one of the upper echelon quarterbacks in this league. So if there's anybody who can kind of manage a situation, Rick Campbell's the guy.
And I'll quickly add here and take it from the guy in Edmonton covering a football team that has not won very much in the last 4 seasons. You just have to win. You need and the hell with feelings. You have to manage that as a coach, and I know it's hard, but you have to say, I need to play the person that's going to, I feel is the best chance to win. The quarterback that has the best quarterback, or the quarterback that gives me the best chance to win, the best personnel, and the heck with feelings. You got to win. And that's all that matters right now is you have to win. So Rick Campbell has to win. And I said, look, if they lose, there's more important games. He wants to win this one, obviously. So you have to find in your mind who you think is going to give you the best chance to win and stick with it. And you park feelings, the heck with feelings. And I think We see that a little bit here in Edmonton with McLeod Bethel-Thompson and Trey Ford. You pick the best guy you think is capable of playing, and you tell the other guy, like it or lump it. Like, you just got to deal with it, okay? And your number may be called down the road. So take it from the guy who has seen a lot of losses. Find a way to win and believe in that.
But then it has to be VA. Like,
Yes.
it has to be VA based on what's been happening. And then you get to the point, and again, I totally agree with the point of, like, you got to win, put the motions aside. Nathan's connection to Victoria and the fact that Amar Doman went out of his way to find a way to get Nathan onto the roster to bring him back in time. To be around at Touchdown Pacific and for TSN to be showing shots of Nathan Rourke standing on the sideline with his arms folded, that's going to be super weird if that happens. But if you're just going off of wins, it has to be VA.
Yeah, and I could see a scenario where Rick Campbell makes that decision, but the one thing we're glossing over is this. And I know it's always the question about Vernon, and I know it's a question that he hates being asked, because I've asked him this, is that, yes, he was on an MOP pace when this season started. But the game that he got injured, the Lions were terrible on offense against Winnipeg.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And we were all thinking the same thing. Is this one of those VA games where we're like, what's happening? Where he can have a handful of games where you're like, this guy, to your point, Marshall, has grown into a star in this league, has invested in himself in the right way, has grown up. And then every so often he has one of those games, and he's allowed to have that game because a quarterback is never perfect. But Vernon Adams, much like Trevor Harris when he was younger, he'd have those games where you're just like, wait a sec. And Trevor just had one this past week, although he's coming off of a knee injury. But you're like, what's going on? And I'm not implying that will inevitably happen to allow Nathan Rourke to come back in, but that's the level of decision making that Rick Campbell has to kind of consider, because the Lions are hosting the Grey Cup, because Amar Doman has invested in a big show this November, and the West is still so tight that the Lions could still win the West. They could still get home field advantage for the West Final and, basically have home field advantage for the whole playoffs. And that's how big this decision is. Yes, touchdown Pacific is huge, Marshall. Absolutely. But the details in this decision are going to be so fine because of what's at stake for the Lions.
Well, it morphs right into this then. Dave, right to you. Straight up, who is the best team in the West? Is it the BC Lions? Go at it.
That's a loaded question.
It's so weird to talk about the West this way. Usually the West has figured itself out, and it's like Winnipeg.
Yeah, guys, do you have any tips on how to answer that question, being from the East? I'm sorry.
I can't change where I was born. Come on, Dave.
I know. I'm sorry.
That's what we need. Some West East Canadian tension right here.
We got to put a little flavor, a spicy flavor to the pod here. Okay. I'm going to say it's the Winnipeg Blue Bombers right now.
Oh,
and they're looking like that classic Bomber team that we have seen for the last number of years, where they just find ways to win, and they find ways to dictate games on defense, which I think they've done. They've tried to do most of the year. Their offense, it's a little meh right now, but they just do enough. I hate to say Zach Collaros looks more like Matt Nichols right now, but they're finding ways to win, and that's no shot at Matt. I just think they don't have the explosiveness on offense that they used to have with Zach. Maybe that changes with Kenny Lawler now, getting back in the lineup more and getting more reps and getting more games. But to me, it's about you look at the Alouettes. How many games have they snatched from the jaws of defeat and won? They're so good at that. And the Bombers are starting to play that way again, where, they just are steady. Things may not go well, but they find a way to win because they just do enough. It's a hard question to ask, though, or to answer, sorry.
Go ahead, guys.
Winnipeg is the best for this reason. When it comes down to those moments and you have to win a game, they've got winners all over the field. Sergio Castillo can make kicks from friggin' 65 yards, right? On defense, yes, Adam Bakehill's on the 6 game, but does anyone doubt that someone like Willie Jefferson can make a play, irrespective of his age, that he can still bull rush, knock down a pass? And, yeah, Zach Collaros, because he's now set the bar so high with winning Grey Cups and winning MOPs, and I'm not bringing the age question in, but Zach and I are the same age, and time is undefeated, and still he can win a game for you. He knows how to win in this league. So I look at Farhan Lalji said recently that he was talking about Calgary, having a pretty high floor, but we don't know what their ceiling is, and I tend to agree. I don't know who Jake Maier is in a big moment yet. I know they have Reggie Begelton. I know they have Rene Paredes. I know they have a devastating linebacking core. But I don't know who that team is when the moment requires them to be something. I don't know who Edmonton is. I haven't known who, beyond losing, Dave. I don't know what Edmonton's been since 2015, right? And as for, when it comes down to winning, when it comes to winning time, it's Winnipeg for me. And that game last week showed everything I needed to know. That, sure, the pieces that have won Grey Cups, that have gotten into Grey Cups, that have been a generational team, they're older, sure, but they've got it. And as for Montreal, I mean, I could totally see a situation where we are back in BC talking about the same game that we were last year. That because these two teams, the Alouettes with their depth and just their pluckiness when it matters, but Winnipeg they're savvy. They just know what it takes to win.
The only reason I have questions about Winnipeg is I wonder if there is part of that exhaustion. And I know that it's not like the NHL or the NBA where you say, if you go on a deep playoff run, you play like 2-3 extra months longer than everybody else. And you come back and it's like, okay, if you're going for your 4th Stanley Cup in the last 5 years, as a random example, how would you possibly be as healthy as everybody else? Because your body's just going to wear down because you've played X amount more games. That was the crazy thing about Brady, right? Was that like Brady they would get that first round bye essentially in the NFL playoffs every year because it'd be a top 2 seed and you move on. But like he played more playoff football games than like 1,000 quarterbacks or something crazy in the NFL have played regular season football games that were very good players. So I wonder about that, not necessarily for Zach, but just the team as a whole, where they've been so good for so long. I wonder how much that is kind of wearing on them, because it is hard to just be excellent as long as you say. Like I thought of that when Matthew said how high the bar Zach has set. He's put it in an impossible place since he's been in Winnipeg. So how do you possibly answer it? And then the hard thing is, how do you possibly answer it year over year over year over? Eventually you're going to fall. And I'm not sure it's going to be this year that it'll fall apart. But the other thing that I really do believe in any sport is that you have to go through pain in order to have success. Like you cannot just float to the top. Zach's a great example of this. He's gone through 1,000 different variations of falling down, and every time he gets up. And that's why he's been the player he's been in Winnipeg, because all of the downs in his career and his life have taught him how to get back up. BC has gone through those downs, and they've been at the hands of Winnipeg. And I really do feel like BC has finally found enough adversity to go through, and maybe even this VA Rourke stuff is going to be the adversity they need, that they're going to learn from, and it's going to bond them together, and they're going to grow from it, and they're going to have a huge touchdown Pacific, and then they're going to run through the playoffs, whether they have to play in the West Semi or if they get the bye and go into first, whatever it is. But I do feel like, to me, it's BC or Winnipeg, and that's not any disrespect whatsoever to Saskatchewan or Calgary, because I love Sask's defense with Corey Mace. It's crazy fun to watch. And for Jake Maier, like Matthew mentions, I don't know what he is in a big moment. I think this is something that I've been surprised by this year. Maybe it's because I did like a month straight of Stamps games, is that as I was watching him closer and closer, I started to realize that there are very real characteristics that obviously Dave Dickinson has fallen in love with. He has, I think, 9, and John Perlberg, our great CFL and TSN stats man, does the game-winning drive stuff. Like during COVID, he built out the database, the history of fourth quarter or overtime game-winning drives. Are you trailing? Do you lead a drive that then scores and wins the football game? And he kind of tallies them. And, so he's got the all-time leaders are in like the mid-20s and all those. Jake Maier has 9 of those, but 3 of them have come in the last 2 months. So it might not feel like it, but that's one of those things when I'm doing prep that I always go back and I check, okay, who had an opportunity for a game-winning drive last week according to Pearly, and who actually succeeded and led a game-winning drive to go ahead and get a victory, because Jake has done that at like a strangely high level over the last couple of months.
I want to see Jake Maier have the same compunction, because he's there, Marshall. Yeah. Absolutely. To have the same edge that Bo did when he was prime Bo, that Mike Riley did when he was prime Mike Riley, that Zach Collaros had. If he can have those moments where like he's like, no, I'm winning this game. Like I don't care. Like when if he can do that in the playoffs, the conversation changes for me. Like
totally.
And you're absolutely right. He showed just a little bit of that.
And here's Jake Maier too. He's not a consistent 4-quarter quarterback, but as a defense, you have to worry about that one quarter where he goes completely off and goes nuclear and goes nuts. I saw it on Labor Day. Elks had a 15-point lead and then stunk in the fourth quarter, and Jake Maier could not be stopped. And that's what usually happens. And it happens often enough in the fourth quarter that the Stampeders pull out a victory, and where Jake Maier was pretty, average to below average for 3 quarters. He can go off in an instant, but it doesn't last very long. So you want him to go off in the first quarter so he can be awful for the next 3.
Yeah. And to Matt's point, he doesn't carry himself at all like somebody who we should be excited about, because he never gets excited about himself. Yeah. Like he's so level-headed and so chill that it's so hard for any of us to realize, because he doesn't come off as anything that we should be like, wow, look at he's great. So you don't feel like he's great, but then you look at some of the metrics and you're like, his completion percentage is super high. He's near the league lead in passing yardage, and obviously some of that is system and design. But I think he's more than a system quarterback. I think he's a really good one. So, anyways, to round out my point on the West, I think it's BC Winnipeg. I got a ton of respect for Saskatchewan and what Calgary's potential is, as Farhan was talking about, with where is their ceiling. And then Edmonton needs to win 1-score games, because if you're 0-7 in 1-score games, as Dave knows, you're not going anywhere.
And to fit this point in, Marshall, about BC, and Dave can appreciate this. If this is their year, then they should look at the 2015 Edmonton team, because they were a team that kept losing to Calgary, and there was that kind of frustration, because even that team had struggled and had losing seasons, and the team before, Dave, you know this better than any of us, was the team that kind of gave up that long playoff streak. But they came to that year, and Mike Riley got injured, and right to start off the year in Fort McMurray, and it kind of destabilized the year a little bit, and we were always looking for that team to have a breakthrough moment, and they did. That's the team that this BC Lions team can look at, because Marshall's right. They keep on tripping up when they face the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. They can't get past the ghost that is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers. And maybe all of these little decisions, maybe all of these little moments of adversity they face this year will culminate in an incredible moment. But right now, the only team that separates itself when it matters is Winnipeg.
Can I just throw one thing to you guys? And just for a lot of the people that are listening to this podcast, maybe never been there, and just really engulfed it on television or at least on radio. Guys, is it that tough? Like if the Blue Bombers are hosting a West semi or the West final, is it that difficult, guys, to play in Winnipeg?
It's the loudest atmosphere in the league. Sorry, Rider fans, who they can get going too, and it's pretty loud. Winnipeg is by far the toughest environment to play in, the loudest environment to play in, because whoever designed that stadium got it right to know where sound travels and how to bounce it back to the field. And the fans there are tremendous. So, yeah, Princess Auto is the toughest stadium and the loudest stadium in the league.
I 100%. I mean, I haven't been there for a playoff game. I have been there for several regular season games. And funny enough, I wasn't there I was there when there were still constantly questions about what it was going to take for Winnipeg to finally make it over the hump. And it was still loud in there. And it was – that fan base is because they're so close to Regina and because they're so close to Saskatchewan, surely the perspective – maybe is a little altered, because we look at, and we all know, we all appreciate the ravenous pride of Rider fans, but those Bomber fans, man, and especially because they have been feeling themselves the last few years. They waited a long time for this run. They waited since 1990 to have a team that's this good, and they're not going to give it up. And that crowd and that team, they feed off each other, and you can see it on TV. So. Yeah, if I'm anyone having to go to a West semi or even a West final in Winnipeg, no, I mean, you're not going to allocate a number on the point spread for it, but at the same time, there's a clear advantage there.
Marsh, I'm coming to you on this one here. The Alouettes, they have a franchise record of 15 victories set in 2009. Red Blacks in 2015 won a franchise high 12 games. If you're going to take a look at these two teams, because I do think they are the best teams in the East, the Argos may be coming, who knows. Which one of those teams would you predict will break their franchise wins record based on where they sit right now?
Yeah, it's a great question because the Ottawa number's lower, so you would say, well, they have a better chance to do it. But based on what I saw from the Montreal-Edmonton game that I just called on Sunday night, I think it's Montreal, and the reason is this. It does not matter what the situation is, they'll find an answer. Mm-hmm. Like that's what I keep coming back to. I've called so many Alouettes games the last 2 years. I feel like I live in Montreal at this point from the number of times that I've been there and been up in that booth. But it's like my favorite moment in this game this past Sunday was Edmonton's running game is getting going, right? And Montreal hasn't really been challenged with a running game like that throughout this year. And you go, well, you have Darnell Sank, you got Tyrese Beverette, you got Mustafa Johnson in the middle, on and on, Dylan Wynn. You'll just find an answer. Well, they weren't finding an answer, though. They were having a very difficult time with Edmonton's running game. We got a shot of Noel Thorpe, the defensive coordinator for Montreal, before they even went down into, well, yeah, throwing the headset down was one thing. But the shot that I loved is Will Muschamp. Anybody knows that used to be a Texas defensive coordinator before he went on to be the head coach at Florida and all the rest. There's a great video if you look up him. It's just called Will Muschamp Goes Crazy. Okay, and what it is Will Muschamp, when he was at Texas, basically there's like a camera, it was like a documentary style thing, where they watch him walk into the room, and Muschamp like storms into the room, and all of his players are on one knee. He gets on the whiteboard, and I swear, in 3 seconds, he draws an entire offense, an entire defense, and goes, we got to seal here, we got to get down here, we got to kick this out. That just do your job. Just fill that gap. That's how we win this game. And he just punches the whiteboard and then walks out of the room. Like he gave them one solution and said, I've drawn this up for you. Here's the X's and O's of it. And he does it. He's just like so locked in. Noel Thorpe didn't do that. But before they even went down the tunnel, as time was expiring in the first half, and we're tap dancing around until the wonderful sideline reporters, the CFL and TSN, hi Matthew, can get themselves an interview as we're going into the locker room, Noel Thorpe was sitting on the bench, and I could see what he was drawing, and it was gaps. He was trying to figure out, well, maybe if I go with a 5-man, but against that, well, they're running that power run, and if they're going to kick out the backside end, I have to have a linebacker fill. Should I place Sankey to the boundary? Maybe that's, but you could see him just sitting there for about 30 seconds, and we caught it. And as I was watching it, I said to Lapo, calling the game with him, like, he's figuring out the run game scheme right now. Like, he's drawing up gaps, and he's figuring out fronts and how he's going to try and answer this. Well, what happened in the second half? Montreal just found answers. They didn't magically do that. It's because they have a coaching staff that is able to see what's not working, find solutions, implement them immediately, and to the credit of the Alouettes players, they take all of that information and they actually execute it. And that's what allowed them to beat Edmonton, I thought, in that second half. So that's my long-winded way of saying Will Muschamp, Noel Thorpe, whiteboards, Montreal is the answer. I think that they're going to get close to that 15-win mark.
KB on Ento, you missed. That's the right towards the end of the game. Noel Thorpe talked about Ento maybe not playing his best, but when he's back there, those last few McLeod Bethel-Thompson threw some beautiful passes, especially the last one. And there's Ento. Like, he's everywhere on this team. There's a solution, and we're not even talking about offense for a second here, but it was the Cole Speaker game. Like, that team can beat you with a bunch of weapons. And Tyson Philpott is injured. When he comes back, think about it. Cole Speaker, Tyson Philpott, Charleston Rambo, and Austin Mack. They can beat you pretty bad. And they have a legitimate quarterback on the bench. Like, Davis Alexander is a winner. And could there be – we're talking about a potential – or not literal quarterback controversy in BC. We could be talking about a potential quarterback controversy in Montreal. Now, Jason Moss loves Cody Fajardo because Cody Fajardo is from the Ricky Ray school of, I will take a hit to make a play. I will take a hit to make a throw. And Jason Moss will stick with him because of that. But if there is a situation where either Cody gets injured because he puts his body on the line, or they're in a game where they're ineffective, Jason Moss is going to have to make a decision, because that team, particularly Charleston Rambo, they love Davis Alexander. And because he comes in there, and yeah, we saw him in Hamilton, 2 turnovers, but came off the bench, was like, screw this, I'm going to go win this football game. We saw him do that in Regina too. So all throughout their lineup are just solutions, like solutions all over the place. And there isn't another team. I'm very happy to see what the Red Blacks have done, particularly at home. They needed a season like this to regenerate some energy into that franchise, especially locally in Ottawa, and I think they're doing that. But when it comes down to the team that could set not only a regular season mark, but is so dangerous, like Winnipeg, but for different reasons, it's Montreal. And, credit to Jason Moss and Danny Machocha and Noel Thorpe, Eric Deslauriers, all those guys in that organization who've built a winner. And, Marshall, I know you've done a lot of games, and the few games that I've done here and there, it's awesome in Montreal. Like, it's so good. They love that team when they're winning. And it's a Montreal thing, whatever. But, you can criticize it when they're not winning. But when they're winning, man, if in the fourth quarter where, a couple weeks ago against Hamilton, everyone had their cell phones up and they had their cell phone flashlights up and they were all doing this unprompted, was so cool. And I'm not implying that I have any dog in the fight, but an East final in Montreal would be awesome. Would be really, really cool. Won't be at the Big O because that roof is falling apart. But yeah, that would really be something, because I'm excited to see this team now that it's feeling itself, now that it knows it can win when it matters, now that it has the depth. I really want to see, teams try to give it their best shot, because the Argos are going to try to do it. The Red Blacks are going to try to do it. Not sure about Hamilton after Labor Day, but yeah, Montreal is the standard right now.
2 things on that too before Dave chimes in is that Ottawa, I know a lot of Red Blacks fans, and they're genuinely confused how good their team is. Like, they don't understand how they're winning games. Like, everybody I talk to, they're just like, this is super weird. We don't know why we're winning, and we don't know why we're winning at home. This is foreign in the last 4 or 5 years. The other thing is, in Montreal, to Matt's point, a name we haven't even mentioned yet, Austin Mack, right? Another way that you can beat it. Once he gets up to speed, kind of like we're talking about with Rourke, he's as good as you get in the league. When he came out of the tunnel pregame on Sunday night, to show kind of how much the Montreal fans are not only educated, but also love this group for what they gave them last year in the Grey Cup, and it's carried over into this season, he got a crazy standing ovation because all of the fans are there. And Moss has talked about that with us, Matthew, where he says, like, pregame, we're warming up. We got 10, 15,000 people that are hanging out, like, pregame, watching us warm up and cheering us on as we come out for early outs and then back down the tunnel and then out stretch lines. And then we actually come out of the birdcage. Like, people get in early in Montreal right now, which makes those players feel like they're actually really being appreciated. And Mac comes out of the tunnel, and I love educated fan bases. Like, ones, and it's not, we're going to experience the ultimate educated fan base in Hamilton because they know everything from the Facebook page of every Argonauts player and tell them on a megaphone.
Get ready for Labor Day, everybody. This Labor Day is going to be nuts.
But I would just say that Montreal, for them to acknowledge Austin Mack and the number of people who gave him a really passionate standing ovation when he came out of the cage, to me, that says that a lot of those people read his quotes, whether it be in newspapers or online through the Alouettes website otherwise, and they appreciated the fact that he had said, I really love this place. I want to be around this place. So, they get it. They get it in Montreal right now, which I think is really helping the chances of them, to your question, Bubba, actually getting to this 15-win mark.
Dave, can I get some love for Ottawa, or
Nope.
is it Montreal?
Nope. No disrespect to what's happened in Ottawa. Like, Montreal, I mean, I saw it up close. I saw it, and look, I want to talk about Jason Moss for a second here. When he got the job here in Edmonton in 2016, it was too soon, too fast, and yet he had the benefit of a very good football team still that went to an East final in 16, went to a West final in 17, 18 it kind of fell apart, and 19 finds a way after Trevor Harris gets hurt, and that's the year I think the light bulb went off for Jason Moss as a head coach. But they get to the East semi, and I think Jason Moss called the best game to that point of his career. Trevor Harris had over 400 yards passing.
Incredible game.
And then they go to Hamilton, and they actually were in the game. It was like 10-point deficit, I think, in the third quarter. And then, Hamilton was just that good that year. And I'm sitting at halftime. I'm going, Morley goes, the Elks are up 17-6. Here's the halftime show coming up, whatever. So we throw it back to the studio, and I'm like, I said, Morley, the push is coming. They better be ready for it. And in the back of my head, I said, they're not ready for it. They won't be. Because there's a little bit of a immaturity on this Elks team, even though I think they're better. But they need to understand more what's going to happen to them. Jason Moss has matured so much as a head coach. We don't see the fiery outbursts. Do not be fooled. That halftime session, and he had 2 extra minutes to make corrections and to say what he feels and what needs to happen. And the Alouettes came out and had a tremendous third quarter on offense and took the game over, scoring 12 points. That's the only quarter that they had any quality offense, by the way, but that was enough. And defensively, when the Elks finally, by the way, if you want to see how horrid their third quarters have been, go to my Twitter account, Dave_Chet on TwitX, and it's not nice, but it's staggering. But the fourth quarter, the Elks get back into it. They finally adjust to what's happening to them. They start running the football. They start driving the field. Then they get close to the end zone. And boy, things change in that red zone. The Elks are the best red zone team in the league. The Alouettes might be the best red zone defense in the league. And boy, it showed. Like, it was quite the battle. And McLeod Bethel-Thompson is going to kick himself on film when he didn't realize he probably had, I think it was Curly Gittins on the backside on a slant. That could have been a touchdown right there, but he locked in on Gino on down the rail, and that's fine. I mean, that happened. Marshall, you know what that life is like as a quarterback. The Alouettes are the best coach team. It's funny. I had a friend of mine going, they're not that good. No, they're frauds. I'm like, man, they've won 18 of their last 19 games. You can't be frauds for that long. Okay. They're the best coach team. They're the best three-phase team. And yet, look, teams are good enough at times to stay with them because they're that kind of team. They remind me of the team in 2015 with Edmonton, where they would win these low-scoring games. Sean White had to come out and kick a 53-yarder. They won a game 16-12 in October at McMahon against the Stampeders. They find a way to win games because they're that good and they're that confident, and they know that. Okay, I'm gonna bring this out too. I'm going to bring a hockey reference. Matthias Ekholm, before the start of the Stanley Cup playoffs, said, you have to be comfortable, Oilers defenseman, by the way, you have to be comfortable in uncomfortable moments, and you have to win games you don't deserve. But the bottom line is you have to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I think the Alouettes thrive at that.
Jason Moss has been, to Dave's point, since that magical run last year in the playoffs, he's been the best coach in the league. And look, we can debate Jason Moss and his intensity and when he gets a buy-in, boy, does he get a buy-in. Like, he's got these guys speaking French in the locker room. He's got them playing pickleball. He's got them competing with each other, and he fosters this intense kind of like you got to be ready. He talked about this with Davis Alexander. He is the best competitor. Moss has fostered this atmosphere where Davis Alexander is the best competitor on the team so that he's ready when he gets his moment to execute. He is the coach of the year right now, undisputed. And to your point, Dave, it's good to see that he got another chance because I watched that team in 17-18 that went to those division finals, and they were a real good team. But to see him evolve his coaching style and to see how much success he's had alongside Danny Machocha in Montreal, I am sure there's a segment of the Edmonton fans that are thinking, would have been fun if we had these two guys on this side of the country.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Guys, there's an interesting situation brewing in Hamilton that's maybe not league-wide known, but if you've been watching the team, obviously I have, it's strange. We've kind of penciled in James Butler as the starting running back, of the Hamilton Tiger Cats running that offense. And there's no doubt of his character, his approach to the game, his effort, top-notch. Over the last couple of games, Scott Milanovich has said that his running back is banged up. Yet he was listed as a healthy scratch for a couple of games. And Greg Bell has played. Matthew, who's the running back in Hamilton? And is this just some type of, maybe we talk about quarterback controversies? Is there a bit of a running back controversy? We also saw James Butler post something on social media about staying strong in times of adversity. What's going on here? And is this something that Scott Milanovich just likes one guy over the incumbent? What do you think?
I thought it was really odd when Greg Bell was taking, as the practice squad running back, was taking first-team reps. When I came back after Copa America and I was at my first Ticats practice, and I saw 5 back there, and it wasn't James Butler taking first-team reps, and it was a guy who hadn't played, I was like, But I know Scott Milanovich as a coach well enough to know that the one position that he is unforgiving and uncompromising on on because of his obsession with ball security is the running back position. And I don't know enough behind the scenes to make any kind of assumption about, because beyond ball security, Scott Milanovich is also very attuned to how his players approach film, how they approach their responsibilities. And I'm not implying that somehow has put James Butler in the situation or the running back position in the situation that it finds itself in, but I know the coach, and I know that ball security and pass protection for running back are up there, if not more important than getting rushing yards. Stability in the pocket is what he wants, and stability with the ball is what he wants. And I can confidently say that if Scott Milanovich isn't confident that one guy's going to do it, he's going to find somebody to do the job. And right now it's Greg Bell. And it's interesting because when I look at James Butler, I see someone who can be that dynamic back. We have seen it. He catch balls out of the backfield. He loves playing football. Like he has such a passion for the game. But it's a microcosm of everything going on in Hamilton right now. Like I have been around this team for so long, and Marshall, I know you can appreciate this too, that a good Ticats team has a vibe about it. And there is, irrespective of their record, like I have watched bad Ticats teams, and they love playing with each other, and they're still kind of fun to watch, and they're engaging and they're engrossing. Obviously, I haven't seen it when now Chris Jones is in the fold, but I can't wait till Labor Day. But that's a completely different beast. Like Labor Day exists outside of the timeline of the regular season. It's a standalone event for the people in Hamilton. But this team hasn't grabbed me the way that other Ticats teams have. This team, I can't put my finger on it, but they just don't have that thing that makes them. And I know that's, feelings and emotions are one thing. It's all about alignment, assignment, execution, and even that the Ticats haven't done regularly this season. So, as speaking about the running back position, I just think it shows you that that there are questions all across the lineup, even starting from quarterback, and I know you guys have talked about this all the way through to the back end of that team defensively. They just don't have it this year yet. Now maybe Labor Day changes that, but Scott Milanovich himself said it's going to take a lot of wins to get out of the East, to get into the playoffs in the East. Mm. Where are the Ticats going to find that? And their running back situation is just another example of they don't have many solutions yet.
Yeah, if we talked about Montreal and Ottawa being the front runners, obviously that means you're looking at the third spot, and there's not much of a threat of a crossover right now. So if you got to beat one team, it's going to be Toronto, because that's worth a lot more when you're going head-to-head. You hand them a loss, you get yourself a win. So for me, the answer to this is James Butler, and the reason that I say that is I respect his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield and just pound people. Like I remember one game I was calling earlier this year, he took a little swing out behind the line of scrimmage to the left-hand side away from our broadcast booth, and it was like the 14th time that Scott Milanovich had essentially done a pass that was like a run, and he catches it, turns up, and it's just like they were chiseling away at the stone until finally it broke. And all of a sudden, James Butler's down the sideline for like 45, 50 yards kind of thing. So his ability to run through tacklers, I think, is pretty elite when he's on. This is one of those moments, like you said, of adversity, Bubba, that I think he's going to be fueled by when and if he gets back into the lineup. But I've loved him for a long time in the CFL. I remember watching him run. I think it might have been a week one against Edmonton where it was he ran the ball so hard for BC that he didn't look like any running back I had seen in the CFL in like 10 years. And I immediately started going, this guy, like he's on a completely different level. If he can harness any of that and get a little fresh, and this is the other thing too, right? Let's always, whether it's healthy scratch or this or that, whether he's banged up or not, or he says he's banged up or not, everybody that plays running back after about 3-4 games is banged up. Now you start talking about 10 games. Now you're definitely banged up. If this means that he's going to get healthy and come back and be a difference maker for them at some point, maybe that is what puts them into that third playoff spot in the East if they can't catch Montreal, Ottawa.
Dave?
Yeah, I've seen enough of James Butler hurt the Elks over the years that it's hard to not say James Butler. I like what Greg Bell does, but Butler. Marshall's point. I mean, he's so dynamic with the ball, and he's so smart. And I always, it's like Walter Fletcher with the Alouettes. If a running back can catch the ball out of the backfield, oh my gosh, that's a very dangerous element for a defense to handle. Scott, like you said, Matt, he's unrelenting. Like he cut the leading rusher in Corey Boyd in 2012.
Oh, I remember that. That's a way
Because he
back
couldn't protect.
for me, Dave, but I was there.
Yeah. And then he signs like a day later with Edmonton. So he's unrelenting, and Scott is.
The Argos won a Grey Cup that year, so Scott Melanders will come back to you and say, like, hey, I made a decision, but we still won a championship.
Yeah, exactly. And he might be the offensive version of a Chris Jones that he, when he makes a decision, he just makes it and moves on. But I like James Butler, and again, I go back to just play the one you think that can win. The back that you think will help you the most. But I've always liked James Butler.
Here we go, guys. Labor Day weekend is here, and whether it's a classic or not, we got to see. We got to see in which game, and we obviously have some traditional matchups and ones that maybe aren't so traditional. Marsh, to you.
Sorry, I was just looking up Chad Cackert's career numbers because we were talking about 20.
You know what? Had it not been for the turf at Rogers Center, what Chad Cacker's career might have been.
And anybody who thinks I'm joking, I was on his wiki page. There you go. Okay, pretty good numbers. For me, it's Hamilton Toronto, and here's the reason: everybody that goes to Hamilton Toronto Labor Day Classic finds a reason to get motivated for the game. We've been around where Hamilton's 0-8 and Toronto comes in, and it's like our only motivation today is to beat Toronto. We've been around Hamilton's one of the best teams in the league. Toronto comes in, and the motivation is we cannot let Toronto get a victory against us, because even if we go on to win the Grey Cup, we still need to win this game. The one that, and I said this to somebody after watching Hamilton play this past week, I'm like, I know Hamilton fans pretty well. I have a neighbor who's a diehard Hamilton Tiger Cats fan, and anytime I'm in my front lawn, it turns into a half-hour discussion about everything that's happening in and around the team. And for me, the vibe I get from Hamilton fans is they're really pissed off right now. Like they want to win so badly, and so when Hamilton fans are frustrated and angry, and they bring that into the stadium, on a normal game, it's like, yeah, they're frustrated and angry and they want to see a victory. And that creates this tense environment at Tim Hortons Field where everybody's ready to go. Then you throw in the fact that Hamilton fans are not only frustrated with their own team, they're also super, super angry at the Argos, like they always are. And now you have double tension inside the stadium. And then you add in Argonauts fans who are coming to the stadium and are kind of frustrated with their team and don't really know how to feel about certain aspects of their roster and the way that things were last year when they were so dominant and creating 1,000 turnovers. And so to me, there's just this incredible amount of tension from 10 different directions going into this game, and that will probably be the energy in the stadium. That typically in Hamilton Toronto matchup for Labor Day means we're going to get a lot of fireworks. And I don't mean after the whistle, messy, people getting ejected, that kind of thing. I just mean there's going to be a lot of hard hitting. It's going to look different than your average CFL regular season game because people will run harder and hit faster, and quarterbacks will have to get rid of the ball quicker, and defensive linemen will be flying off the ball and getting after running backs and pass protection and trying to punish them. Not just, I'll take this play off. It's week 14 and I'm tired. No, it's like every single play in a game like this with these dynamics, it makes for a great football game. So Hamilton, Toronto for me.
Matt, I don't know if Toronto and Hamilton will be your selection, but let's be honest too. On all the things that Marsh just said there, there's another element there too. Chad Kelly got kind of a soft touch when he made his first appearance onto the field. That's not going to be the case in Tim Hortons Field.
You hit the nail on the head, Bubba. I can tell you on my social media feeds, Ticat fans cannot wait. And before I come across as passing judgment on Chad Kelly, this is not that. We're going to learn a lot about Chad Kelly on Labor Day. Now, Chad Kelly he'll tell you he's played in big games in the SEC. Absolutely. He's won a Grey Cup. Absolutely. When he comes out on Labor Day, I can tell you he's going to hear something very different. And it's not only a part of the flavor of that historic contest, it's not only within the context of his 9-game suspension, but everything to Marshall's point about how the Ticats feel about themselves. And as I said previously, this game exists outside of the timeline of the regular season. I have been very lucky to be at the last Labor Day Classic at Ivor Wynn. I have been to 12 there was one year they didn't have it, so I think 9, 10, or 11 now. Anyways, whatever. I've been very lucky to be in this league for a long time. But this one's going to be different because of the Chad Kelly factor. Because we could learn a lot of things about him in terms of how he comports himself as a starting quarterback. He could go in there, and we saw a bit of it. Like some of the throws he made to Damonte Coxie, and knowing that Damonte Coxie will put his body on the line for Chad Kelly. We've seen that again and again and again. There could be moments where Chad Kelly has to deal with, as Marshall said, a Chris Jones defense that is going to be playing downhill. And Chris Jones will go after Chad Kelly early. And if Chad Kelly goes ahead and he can navigate that, we're going to learn a lot about the way he composes himself, because what we know right now is in a big game, the biggest game that he played, which was the East Final, he crumbled. But he's going to hear it. He is going to hear it nonstop. And for those who don't know, there behind the bench, the visiting bench at Tim Hortons Field, if I have to go ahead and dictate the things that I've heard, I would never be on any kind of broadcast.
There's a reason if you watch our CFL and TSN broadcast that anytime I throw down to Scianitti in between the benches, he's nowhere close to standing behind the visiting bench.
It is.
We can't put the microphone there.
Awful. It's awful, the things they say. And I have seen players literally turn around and say, all right, if you got some, and fans will give it, and it doesn't stop, and it won't stop. And I'm not saying it should. I'm not making it permissible. I'm not doing any of that. But that is what Chad Kelly is going to face. And I'm excited because there has to be tension on Labor Day. It's that one. I say that within reason. I don't want people being stupid. I mean, the Ticats do a great job in their pregame to remind people, hey, you know what? It's just a game, everybody. But it's more than just a game on that day. And the added flavor of Chad Kelly, as you mentioned, Bubba, just turns the heat up just a little bit.
Dave, okay, we've been going crazy about the East.
Well, I feel like anybody.
Dave, what about it?
I can't top
Anybody
this.
who's listening to this that is like, hey, Dave from Chet is on there. I want to listen to this, and they're like in Edmonton or Calgary, and they're listening. They're like, you guys do know we play football too, right?
Elks fans are going, is Trey Ford going to play? We'll find out later in the week. This is my 18th Labor Day. Of course, I'm going to say the Battle of Alberta Labor Day because it's actually on Labor Day. Sorry, Rider and Bomber fans, but we got the day right. Anyway, your game's good too. But this is my 18th Labor Day. And look, Edmonton doesn't win. I've only seen 3 wins on Labor Day since I've been calling games in the booth with Halsey and with Morley. But you know, the flyover with the CF-18s, a packed McMahon is always special, which we just, you know, we don't get enough of. There's attendance issues, and that stadium's so darn old, but for one day it's charming. And the Elks fans that flock from Edmonton down to Calgary, the Occupy McMahon mentality. It's, you know, the tailgating before, just, you know, everything about it. It's a different game, and you always want to win on Labor Day. And I know when new players come to the league, what's Labor Day? Think rivalry game. Oh, I got it. No problem. We're good. Yeah, but to me, it's, you know, that vitriol you get between, you know, the city down south in Calgary and the city up north in Edmonton. And then, you know, the rematch is special too, I think, for different reasons up in Edmonton. But yeah, look, again, 3 wins in 18 seasons for myself, witnessing, calling the games in McMahon. But yeah, the Battle of Alberta just brings that spice. So I love it. Similar to what you have in Hamilton and Toronto.
Everything changes on Labor Day.
Yeah,
I mean, all of us have been in this league long enough, and it sounds self-defeating for the whole competitive makeup of the Canadian Football League, and it's not meant to be this way. But something changes on Labor Day. It's so cool. Like, you can feel it. You know, the first time I experienced it in 2012, I was a writer still for the National Post. But when I got in the field for the first time and I felt it, especially when they opened Tim Hortons Field 10 years ago. My God, it's been 10 years. When they opened it 10 years ago, I was there, and it was like 1,000,000 degrees on the field. And it was like, Marshall, remember, you and I were it was like it was like 50. It was literally 50 degrees on the field. And it's like, why are we playing football on this? And it was different. Like, it's like, to Marshall's point again, just the hits were harder. And it wasn't just like fisticuffs afterwards. It was just like, no, both teams really wanted to win. And the Ticats won, and they had this hole in those god-awful gunmetal gray jerseys in a million degrees. And they all kind of like rallied around each other, and it was like a college football rivalry game. Mm-hmm. And that's the closest comparison that you can make. And what it does is it reminds people that this is a regional league. That unlike the NFL, which is, with all its circus and all the trappings of being just this explosive entertainment event every Sunday, the CFL is a very regional league. And to Dave's point about, the team up north in Edmonton going down south and facing that team in Calgary, like, it's so cool for those who've never experienced it. And I'm not doubling down on, Ticats Argos being better, because I don't believe that. I think everything has its own merit. But you drive on the QEW and you get close and you see DeFasco, you see Stelco, you see everything that's characteristically Hamilton, but you drive right on Melrose, on Barton, and on those streets right by Tim Hortons Field, and it just feels different. And those people have been tailgating since 5 o'clock since the night before, and they are ready to go. And it's just one of those things that I feel so fortunate that I get to stand there when that old bomber from the Hamilton Warplane Museum just like
the Lancaster
lumbers over you're just like, yeah, man, it's on now. And it's hard not to get caught up in it. And it is the day beyond the Grey Cup that makes our league so amazing.
Yeah. I don't blame Matthew for thinking I was on the field with him when they opened Tim Hortons Field, because Matt, that was my final year of playing McMaster University football. But the reason that you just made me feel really old when you said that was when you said, oh my God, it's been open for 10 years. We had the lumbering Lancaster circle around because we kicked off at the same time and somebody let them know. So we got a flyover for a university football game, which was the Lancaster, because they went from Tim Hortons Field and came up into West Hamilton, turned around and went over that direction. And the other part of that makes me feel old when you say, oh my goodness, that's been open for 10 years, is like, yeah, we've been covering games at Tim Hortons Field and Labor Days for 10 years and all the rest. But my son is going to kindergarten, JK, the morning after this Labor Day game in Hamilton. And like the idea of being, stamping times of, oh yeah, we were here and then the stadium opened, I was a university football player, and then, oh my God, it's been 10 years and my kid was born in the middle of the pandemic in 2020, and oh, here we are, and he's going to kindergarten, like daycare is done. That's one of those things where, and again, this, Matty, from being in the stadium, it's this crazy tension, all the rest, but it's also this like family party because it's everyone's last chance in Hamilton to have a great family outing. And then as soon as you get home from the game, it's like, all right, school starts in the morning, back to reality. Yeah, let's go and do the normal, the grind, right?
Yeah. Thanks for correcting me, Marshall. I forgot that you were too busy leading McMaster to a Vanier Cup. My apologies for putting you. But I was thinking, I swear Marshall was there, and then I remember watching you in the Vanier Cup. No, it's he can't be there. When he was getting ready.
That's the furthest that the word leading has ever been stretched, by the way.
Hey, listen, you've played in a national championship game. The closest I've come to that is sitting on my ass watching a national championship game. So.
Dave, the interesting thing about this is, we talk about the Bombers and the Riders, and, Derek Taylor, who's kind of played both sides of this equation as a play-by-play guy, he would tell you that the Banjo Bowl is actually better than the Labor Day game.
Whatever. What does DT know? Besides everything.
Oh, guys.
How does he get away with that? How does he get away? I mean,
I don't know.
I don't know how I get it. It's a job and all this stuff. But like, how do you do that? That's only something Derek Taylor could do. Play both sides.
How you do it, because DT is so smart that he can maneuver his way through it, but also he would rent in Regina and buy in Winnipeg. That's how you do it.
Guys, tremendous podcast. The one flavor that I think when I listen to this podcast again, because it's been so good, is the love of Canadian football that each one of you guys have. And that's why the CFL This Week just works. As I said, it not only is it great because we get guys from all over the place that respectively love their team, but the love of the Canadian football game, right down to that goddamn Rouge to the Labor Day. It's been spectacular to have you guys. I know there's also people out there that want to communicate at you. Probably there's some Stamps fans, Dave, that want to communicate with you. How can they do so if they have a beef with you or just want to agree with you as well, too?
Well, I blocked them all, so they can't. No, I'm kidding. Dave_Ched on the TwitX.
Matthew?
TSN Scianitti on Instagram and Twitter. I refuse to call it X.
Yeah, I'm with you on that there too. And Marsh, I know you're the analytical guy. You for whatever reason love to spend your free time just charting stuff.
I'm just trying to figure out, like, my favorite thing is heat maps of quarterbacks, because you spend 18 hours punching in all of the information and data on quarterbacks and depth of target and width of target, and you have absolutely no idea what it's going to look like, and then you just like press the final button and go bang, and then the heat map comes up, and every single time it's either, oh, that's exactly what I thought it would be, or, oh, what is this? Like, anytime that I punch that stuff in, it's very strange. But at TSN_Marsh is where people can find me on Twitter. Matthew's correct. And Instagram.
Folks, CFL This Week, just one example of the outstanding, entertaining, informative content you can find on Ticats.ca and, of course, Ticats Audio Network on a daily basis now. Daily! Stuff like this all the time happening. Link, subscribe, comment whenever you listen and you watch your favorite podcast, please. We appreciate it. It does mean a lot to us. Again, appreciate you guys. Appreciate Labor Day. Appreciate the Canadian Football League. And certainly we'll be back to break it all down on the CFL This Week. I'm Bubba O'Neil. Thanks for joining us.